and thank you all for being here. And I know this is kind of a tough time of day right after you maybe have just eaten. So thanks for hanging in there with me as we embark on the releasing resistance. And similar to Gail, I also have some notes. So if you see me glancing down, that's what's going on there. And just to piggyback on that introduction, my roots are in human resources and leadership development. And let's see what else I wanted to share with you, because you shared a lot of what I was going to share. That's great. And as Tiffany mentioned, I am the author of an autobiographical self-help book called Stepping Into More: Lessons from a Recovering Perfectionist, which details my journey with perfectionism and specifically how it stopped me from honoring my creative self-expression value, which really usually comes through in singing. How it stopped me, how I reconnected, how I really embraced my creative self again. So that's what the book is about. And I also produced a CD of songs as a companion, and you can find me on Spotify, Apple, all those good places. So that's a bit about me. And it's really wonderful to start to hear some of your stories and a bit about what brought you here today. And whether you're launching your own business, you're leading a department or a committee, or you're trying to influence people, this topic applies to all of those things. And one of the reasons I am so passionate about this topic does tie back into my time at ICF Los Angeles. When I was president, and I did serve on the board for 6 years, similar to Tiffany. And I did create a lot of change, and in addition to special interest groups, many other things. And it's really gratifying and rewarding to see that those changes have lasted. And when I stepped into the role, I thought, oh, I'm going to have a lot of challenges with the people I'm leading. I think I had about 12 direct reports, and I was anticipating personality struggles and different conflicts, etc. But really what I found was that the greatest challenge was within myself. And, some of those old tapes and limiting beliefs. Even when Yulin Kong even offered me the role, I was like, what, me? Like, who am I? I can't do this. What the hell are you talking about? You're offering this to me? I was truly shocked. And then, am I enough? Am I making right decisions? What if I disappoint people? What if people don't like me? All of these old stories definitely came forward, and it became really the biggest obstacle in my leadership. And what made the difference for me was starting to recognize the patterns of those old voices and realizing that they were lying to me. These were just old patterns that were having lies to me. And I'll share more about what was behind those lies in just a bit. And the whole experience of being leading ICF Los Angeles, which was definitely the biggest leadership opportunity I had had up until that point, really led to a shift in the way I lead, not only others, but really myself. And so all of you should have some materials. We're going to be going on a little journey inward as we're going through our topic together. And also we're going to be utilizing the chat quite a bit as well. So if you are able to download the materials, terrific. If not, no worries. You could just use paper, computer, however you want to do this. So let's take a look at where we're headed. Well, hopefully my slides will work. Give me a sec. There we go. Okay, so our agenda. So I'm going to continue to set a little more context for you, and we're going to talk about this idea of mental resilience, which is really based on the positive intelligence framework, which I will be sharing the pillars of that framework with you today. And to really make this value added for you, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to think of a real life leadership challenge slash opportunity. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And you're going to get to apply that opportunity to the three pillars of the positive intelligence framework, which are number one, understanding our judge and our saboteurs. Number two, understanding who we are at our core, which is our sage. And number three, a tool that will help us to quiet the negative voice of the saboteur and judge and help us better access our sage through a practice called positive quotient reps, or PQ reps. And then you're going to have a chance to apply all of this to your real life opportunity. So you'll get some work done as part of our time together as well. So you'll notice in the materials as well that there's a page at the very end. It's an action plan. So if you want to have sort of a catch-all for your ahas and don't want to have to remember where you wrote things down, you can utilize it in that way if that works for you. And as I mentioned, our time together today is based on the framework Positive Intelligence that was created by New York Times bestselling author Shirzad Chamine. And the whole premise of this framework, and I am certified in this framework, is the idea of mental resilience. And what I mean by that is when we are able to be mentally resilient, it's our capacity to be able to handle life's challenges in a more positive way. It's as simple and as challenging as that. So how do we show up in a more positive way versus how we're hardwired as humans to tune into the negative? And before we get deeper into the pillars of this framework, I want to invite you to consider that real life opportunity I was mentioning a moment ago. You can also find this on page 2 of your materials if you printed out the materials. And I like you to consider really any leadership opportunity slash challenge. And it could be, whether you're in a role right now where you're leading. I know some of you are launching your businesses, so maybe it's something related to that and a challenge or an opportunity you're seeing there. And just briefly describe it. Also notice what kind of thoughts or feelings are you having about this opportunity. And then lastly, why does this even matter to you? And Gail spoke a bit about the why. So why is this opportunity compelling or meaningful for you? So I'm going to give you an introverted moment to reflect and to go ahead and come up with a situation. And just take a few more moments. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg here. So we're just coming up with a situation you'd like to play with and explore. And wherever you're at is just fine. So with now having this in the background, this situation that you've identified, let's start to further explore this framework, and starting with the first pillar, which is called our judge. Just a little sound effects for you. So the judge, we all have the judge. And the judge is really the mental patterns that undermine our mental resilience. And The judge is known as the master saboteur, and the judge judges three specific things. It judges ourself, it judges others, and it judges situations or circumstances. And what I mean by that last bullet there, it's that voice that tells us, you know, you can't be happy until you get X, whatever X is. Maybe it's the client, a new job, a relationship, whatever X is. And then you get X. And you might celebrate for 5 minutes. And that voice comes back. Oh no, you can't be happy. You need to get the next thing. And that is a never ending hamster wheel. So, this is the judge that all of us have. It's part of the human condition. And the judge doesn't play fair, and it likes to enroll what we call accomplished saboteurs. And this is a lovely cast of characters you have on the screen here, whether it be the controller, the hyperachiever, the restless, the stickler, which is tied to perfectionism, the pleaser, the hypervigilant, the avoider, the victim, or the hyper-rational. These all are different aspects of ourselves. And I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on the specific saboteurs today. And as Tiffany mentioned before our session, if you're interested in delving deeper into your own personal saboteurs and which seem to grip you the most, I'm going to share an opportunity with you at the end to take the saboteur assessment and also to be able to really delve deeper and possibly have a conversation with me to really better understand your saboteurs. So more to come on that in just a bit. So the idea here is that when we're emotionally triggered and we're experiencing resistance, that the judge will show up with one or more of these saboteurs. And this causes a lot of those not so pretty feelings, whether it be judgment, shame, fear, disappointment. If we're experiencing those types of feelings, there's a good chance that our judge and saboteurs are in the driver's seat. And all of these are really coming from a place of fear. And when the judge and the saboteurs are showing up, they are lying to us. And as I mentioned to you earlier with my leadership experience, I started to see this pattern of the lies that I was telling myself. And for each of us, the lie might look a little different. Even if we have the same saboteurs, we're all unique beings. And so the flavor of the lie might be slightly different or look different. I can share, though, that one of the biggest lies of each of these saboteurs is that they will tell us that we cannot continue to be successful unless we show up in a way that listens to them. Meaning, I cannot, for example, hyperachiever is a big saboteur for me. I cannot be successful unless I'm constantly achieving and I'm working and I'm focusing and I'm pushing and things are hard. And that is a huge lie, because the truth is that, yes, if I continue to show up in that way and to push and to fight and to make things happen, I might achieve quote unquote success, but I will never be happy. And that's a big distinction. So that's sort of the biggest lie of all of these saboteurs. You need to keep me going. This is the way you got to where you are now. And if you don't, you will not be successful. And thankfully, we can show up in other ways without all that pushing and all those horrible emotions, and not only experience success, but experience more joy and fulfillment and positivity in our lives. So again, to recap, we get emotionally triggered. Our judge gangs up with one or more of these saboteurs. We have usually an open mouth, insert foot moment. And, and then we feel all these horrible feelings. And then where do we go from there? Now, one thing I want to point out about these saboteurs is that most of these have been developed by the time we are 5 years old. Okay, so this is a combination, these saboteurs, of nature and nurture. We have a predisposition for these saboteurs. So it doesn't mean that you've had necessarily had a horrible childhood because you are gripped by some of these saboteurs. They're just naturally part of who we are. And again, these were built by the time we were 5 years old as our younger self survival strategies. So at that time, these approaches and strategies might have worked really well for you. They're not working for you now, though. And can we start to break that pattern? And Gail spoke a little bit about parts, right? And how do we befriend those younger parts of ourselves and let them know you don't need to work so hard. You don't need to show up in this way. I've got you covered, which is really coming from my sage, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So, one other thing I like to point out is that the saboteurs are strengths that are overdone or misapplied. Saboteurs are strengths that are overdone and misapplied. So, what I mean by that, going back to my hyperachiever, when I'm on the sage side of that and things are flowing, I'm able usually to get a lot of things done, like I did in my year as president. I was able to accomplish many, many things with grace and ease most of the time. But the minute I start hearing this voice in my head, Rachel, you're only as good as your last success. You better not blow this, or people are not going to respect you. You're a loser. Oh, yeah. You don't want to be in my head late at night. It's like being in a dark alley in a not so safe neighborhood. That's my saboteur. And then I know, oh, there's the lie. I can hear that pattern. I know that voice. So don't want to get rid of that saboteur because I love being able to achieve and accomplish lots of things with ease and grace. And I need to recognize when I've gone into the other side of that continuum and now I'm in saboteur land. All right, so with this idea of judge and saboteurs, I'd like to now invite you back into your real life situation. And you have some reflective questions here for you. And these are on page 4 if you have the handout. And as you see here, what judgments might you be making about yourself or others or the situation? What fear or concern might be driving those judgments? What are the lies that your judge and saboteurs are telling you? And what, if any, physical sensations do you notice as you're starting to connect with those voices? And the reason I bring you into the physical is because the body is the only part of us that's really present. Our head is going to the past or looking to the future. And oftentimes our body is giving us so many clues and so much information that we tend to ignore until we're in pain. So if we could start to catch, there's that tightness in my gut, or I just stopped breathing. All right, then I know that my judge and saboteurs are in the house. What can I do real time with this information? So what, if any, physical sensations are associated with some of these negative thoughts and feelings? And then what are the objective facts of your situation? Gail was getting into the story, right? So I'm asking you to distinguish between your story versus the facts. What can you absolutely taste, touch, hear, smell, see versus assumptions, judgments, and anything else you're making up about this situation that you're in? All right, so go ahead. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here to reflect and get familiar with how the judge and saboteur might be affecting you in this situation. Take another minute. And as you're processing all of these questions, I'm going to invite you in the chat to just briefly share what thoughts or feelings are coming up on this opportunity as you're connecting with your judge and saboteurs. And you could just put whatever, one word, two words, whatever's coming up for you as you're starting to really connect with where this resistance might be. Thanks, Tiffany. So you get worked up. Who else? Imposter syndrome. Thank you. Tears behind the eyes, butterflies in the stomach, tingles all over my body, heart racing. Woo, can relate to that. Anxiety, coming up in new situations, uncharted territory. Excellent. So thank you for allowing yourself to connect to those old patterns and old tapes and for being vulnerable and courageous and sharing that with us. And as I said, thankfully, there's another pillar to this framework. It's not just about understanding our judge and saboteurs, which are aspects of ourself. At our core, we are actually the sage. And the sage is the wiser elder part of ourselves. You might think of the sage as our inner Jedi, and perhaps the judge and saboteurs as our Darth Vaders, okay, for our Star Wars fans. And when we align with our sage, this wiser elder part of ourselves, we can experience compassion, empathy, innovation. We know what matters to us. We know how to laser focus on what's most important. There's a lot of wonderful qualities that we're able to channel through our sage. And the sage operates from what's known as the sage perspective. And that is the sage perspective that every challenge we have can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. Even the most challenging challenges. It's so easy for us when we're presented with a challenge to think, why is this happening to me? This is the worst thing ever. I can't believe this. And if your experience is anything like mine, usually those experiences later on with some space and distance, I realized, whoa, those were the biggest learning opportunities of my life. And when I was able even just to ask the question in the midst of all the swirl, what am I supposed to be getting from this? What am I supposed to be learning here? Boom, things start to shift. Now there's a new lens. I'm starting to access my sage. And just even a personal example, many years ago, I left Easton Sports as the manager of training and organizational development. I went to Transamerica in a training role. Very first day after my orientation, which I was hired to redesign the orientation, emergency HR meeting. Guess what? Your role no longer exists. This is part of a merger that happened last year. We're going to share more with you in a couple of weeks, but basically you need to decide whether you want to re-interview for your job or eventually I learned take a package. I was just about to finish my master's degree, my thesis. Easton never rehired my job as I figured I had gone as high up as I could at Easton. And I used that time to not interview, get the package, go back to Easton as a consultant, start facilitating with Development Dimensions International, and launch my business. And that was over 20 years ago. So it was truly a gift for me. Didn't know it at the time, though, trust me. So, with all of that in mind, this idea of the sage, I want to invite you to go back to your real life opportunities here and to ask yourself some of these questions. What might this situation be inviting me to learn, develop, or discover? What truly matters to me in this situation? What might be one small, meaningful step that aligns with what's most important to me here? And keeping with the idea of the sages, our elder, wiser self, what wisdom might your elder, wiser self offer to you at this moment? So go ahead, take a minute and ponder those questions. They are also on page 5 of your materials. Just take a few more moments to answer those questions. And as you're starting to bring that to a close, when we start to better understand these ideas of the judge and saboteur and who we really are at our core, being our sage, it's natural to ask ourselves, well, how do I quiet those negative voices of the judge and saboteur so that I can more easily access my sage? And that's what this next pillar of this framework is really all about. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to an experience. And I know some of you are familiar with positive intelligence, so this won't be new for you. And for some of you, this will be. And that is called PQ, or positive quotient reps. And this is a mindful activity that serves a couple of purposes. One of which is it allows us to quiet the negativity of our judge and saboteurs and get to a more neutral place. So, from that neutrality, we're better able to access our sage. So, instead of just talking about it, like I said, I want to give you an experience. So if you are comfortable and able, I'm going to invite you to sit upright with your feet on the ground and to go ahead, if you are comfortable, and close your eyes, or to have a soft glance down. You might consider putting your hands near your belly. And let's just start by taking a nice slow inhale through the nose, feeling the belly expand, perhaps imagining a balloon. And for this first round of breath, let's go ahead and sigh it out. Feel free to move around, just coming into the space. And continue to breathe nice slow inhales through the nose, feeling the balloon expand. And this time exhaling through the nose, allowing the balloon to deflate. And go ahead, do that a couple more times on your own. Nothing to control, just observing what's naturally happening. And as you continue to breathe at your own natural rhythm, I'm going to invite you to take the palm of one hand and hold it up, and take the opposite hand and slowly run down the fingers and palms of the opposite hand, tuning into the sensation of touch. Noticing all those sensations as you move your hand down the opposite hand. Keep breathing and do that a few times. And as thoughts come up, and they will, with compassion, bring yourself back to the sensation of touch. And now, as you continue to breathe, I invite you to take your index finger and put it under your nose. And as you inhale through the nose, notice the temperature of the air coming through the nostrils. And as you exhale through the nose, notice the temperature coming out. Perhaps there's a shift in temperature. Do that a few more times. You might notice the temperature might be a little warmer on the exhale. Great, you can put your finger down and we're going to now tune into the sensation of sound or hearing. And as you continue to breathe, notice the farthest away sound that you can hear. And now notice the closest sound that you can hear. And if you haven't already noticed the sound of your breath, please do so now. Terrific. So take a couple more rounds of breath, feeling a sense of connection, groundedness, and presence. Feel free to stretch if you would like, bringing yourself back into the space. And as you are ready, you can open your eyes. Welcome back. All right. So I'd like you to just note for yourself before we did those PQ reps, those few minutes of PQ reps, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, how stressed were you feeling? Just note that for yourself. And now that you've just had just a few minutes of PQ reps, I'd like you in the chat to let us know where you are right now with that stress level. Did it increase, decrease, or stay the same? So go ahead, please share that with us in the chat. And hopefully you were able to decrease your stress level. Awesome. You got Gail, Tiffany, decrease. I love it. All right. So this was just from a few minutes of PQ repping. Oh, thank you, Belia. I hope you pronounced your name right. And imagine if we were to do this more regularly and proactively, what impact this could have on our overall being. And yes, PQ reps, for those of you that aren't familiar with them, are a form of mindfulness. And for those of you that meditate, you might go, oh, yeah, that's like meditation. And yes, this is a form of mindfulness. And what is unique and different about this is that, I don't know about you, but when I meditate, I have these pristine conditions. I might light a candle, I have music, the lights are soft. This is all wonderful and beautiful. And when I'm in real life and I'm triggered, I cannot recreate all of those things to calm down. So one of the beauties and practicalities of this practice of PQ reps is if we are proactively doing PQ reps, our self-command muscle, it's called, is charged. And when it's charged, then real time, as I'm getting triggered, I can utilize these PQ reps to get me to a more neutral place so that I can access my sage. So I might just start doing some nice, slow, intentional breaths as I'm triggered. I might start rubbing my fingers together. I might even start doing PQ reps on the person I'm talking to. I know, Tiffany, you would never trigger me, but if you did, I might start looking at you and just noticing, wow, I never really noticed her glasses before or her eye color. Yes, you do look magnificent. So this is real-time support for us when we feel that inner resistance starting to build. And research shows that with as little as 10 seconds of on an MRI machine doing PQ reps, it actually starts to quiet the region of our brain where our judge and saboteurs live, primarily in the amygdala. and start to strengthen the part of our brain where our sage lives, which is primarily in the prefrontal cortex. So there is a neuroscience element to this as well. So as you start to embrace this framework and this whole idea of the judge, saboteurs, and sage, the question might come up for you, is it really possible to shift from saboteur to sage real time in tough situations? And the answer is yes, but the speed and depth depend on your mental muscle strength. And as I mentioned, it is recommended with this practice that we're practicing PQ reps proactively, ideally at least 15 minutes a day. And there's different ways to create a practice for yourself. But this allows that charge to, we need the battery to have some charge to it in order for it to be effective. And this also really speaks to the idea that positive and lasting change and impact requires only 20% insight or awareness and 80% mental muscle. So if you think about awesome workshops you've been to, like even today, and you walked away thinking, oh, that's so cool, and then we don't do anything with it, it's because we're not building the mental muscle. And PQ reps help us to build that mental muscle. So it's really important to develop this as a practice. I have found it to be extremely impactful to support me real time in when I'm dealing with my own challenges. All right, so segueing from this, so far we've focused on what's happening personally when we are noticing resistance and why that's so important to us as leaders. And one reason that is important as leaders is because whatever's going on inside of us doesn't stay inside of us. It becomes contagious. And for many of you, you might be aware of this idea of mirror neurons. And that's the specialized part of our brain cells that help us understand and connect with others by unconsciously mirroring what we observe. So have you ever walked into a meeting and without people even saying a word, immediately sense the tension in the room? Or the opposite. Maybe you're talking to someone who's very grounded and calm, and you start to notice, ooh, I'm feeling a little better than when I walked into this room. Those are our mirror neurons. And we can influence each other's emotional state without even realizing it, depending on where we're at with our judge and saboteurs and our sage. So thinking about your leadership opportunity that you've identified, people, whether the other people in your situation are going to be picking up where you're at, whether it's through your tone of voice, the facial expression, your energy, your levels of anxiety, that is going to impact them. And you as the leader need to continually be setting the emotional climate of the room. So I like you to consider in the chat, if you think of a leader that you've worked with in the past that was really stressed out, how or if did that leader affect you? So go ahead and just jot down what kind of impact that leader had for you. Set you off. I like that. Your nervous system got jacked. Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah, I had to do a lot of breathing. Kudos to you for even realizing breathing was needed. Transferred so much stress onto me, I started dreading going to work. Wow, huge impact. Frazzled your nerves. Yes, so these mirror neurons are a real thing. And of course, the opposite is true as well. When we come in, Nicole spoke about intention today. When we come in with a very clear intention, and this is what gravitas is all about, without even opening our mouths, people sense that energy. And then it impacts their sage or their saboteurs, depending on where they're at. So the good news is that the sage also is contagious. And so we need to be very intentional about how we're showing up because we know it's going to impact other people. So with that, I want to invite you back to your leadership challenge that you identified. And on your own, just imagine if you were to enter the situation from your judge and your saboteur, what kind of emotional climate do you think you would be creating in this situation? And just note that for yourself. And then I'd like you to consider if you were intentionally entering from the sage and what might become possible for not only you, but the other stakeholders in the room. So I'd love to hear, what do you think might shift? What might be possible if you went in with intention to align with your sage? So every time that we strengthen our sage, we are increasing the likelihood that others are going to be able to access their sage as well. And that's one of the most powerful forms of leadership that we have available to us. All right. So, with that, I want to also talk a little bit more about others involved in our situations. And one of the greatest gifts of thinking about positive intelligence in this framework is it helps us to become less judgmental and more accepting, not only of ourselves, but of others. And when someone behaves in a way that frustrates us, it's so easy for our judge to show up, right? We might start labeling them, oh, they're being difficult, or they're not respecting me, they're being rude, they're overly emotional, whatever it is. Tiffany's heard that one before. But positive intelligence invites a different question, and that is what might be driving the behavior? Every saboteur has a survival strategy. And it was developed with a positive intention, that younger part of ourselves I mentioned before, doing its best to survive in our world. It was trying to get a valid need met. So, can we see that younger child in the other who might be triggering us and be able to look in their eyes to the inside their soul to be able to understand what's really behind this behavior that I'm witnessing and I'm experiencing with this other person? And having some more compassion for them as well. So, with that in mind, going back to your situation, I'd like you to consider the other people involved in your situation, if there are, and to ask yourself these questions. What saboteur might they be operating from? Or what do you think their judge might be telling them in this situation? And then what positive intention could be underneath the behavior? What might they be trying to protect? And how might this understanding change your perspective or your response in the situation? And just as an example, so let's say someone's coming up and presenting as being very controlling, they might actually be seeking certainty. Someone who's resisting change might be scared to make a mistake. Somebody who's dominating a conversation might desperately want to be seen and heard and valued. So take a moment on page 6 of your materials and reflect on what might be beneath the surface of some of those behaviors that we're experiencing with others. And as you're considering these questions and really getting curious, I love to hear in the chat what might be what we call one sage superpower that would help you respond more effectively to this person. And when we talk about the sage superpower, these are different tools when we access our sage that come more naturally to us. So, might you be able to be more curious, have greater compassion, be more empathetic, have greater patience, discernment, show up in a more calm manner, perhaps be more accepting. So, what one word comes up for you when you really are seeing yourself showing up aligned with your sage as you're interacting with someone else who might in the past really triggered you? Thanks, Gail. Curiosity, the antidote for so many things. So true. Who else? What might be a one way for you to access your sage? Deborah, thank you. Calm. Anyone else? Courage, discernment, empathy, curiosity. Fantastic. Yeah, look at the wisdom we have in this room. I love it. And none of these qualities, these sage superpowers, are available to us when we're in the survival mode of our judge and saboteurs. And that is also another reason why PQ reps help us, because it helps weaken that grip that the judge and saboteurs have and allow for us to be able to be open to access the sage and these incredible superpowers that we have when we're aligned with the sage. And when we stop asking what's wrong with this person, we might be able to start asking what might be happening for this person. And we don't necessarily need to agree with their behavior. It doesn't mean also that we're avoiding maybe difficult conversations or lowering expectations. We're just showing up in a way that's going to better allow people to bring the best versions of themselves. And thank you, Tiffany, for that Mel Robbins reference. Ah, let them. Yes, because we can't control them anyway, that's for sure. So this is when the sage becomes so powerful because we understand much more about ourselves and how we're showing up as well as the other person. And we're able to show up with some of these amazing qualities that you all just shared in the chat. So now that we've explored a bit more about our own saboteurs and what might be driving someone else's behavior, the question becomes, how do we intentionally choose the leader that we desire to be? And that is where we're headed now. So we've talked about the saboteurs and how they create that inner resistance within us and how they unintentionally activate the saboteurs of others around us. So the question then becomes, how do we interrupt that cycle? How do we move from autopilot to making more conscious choice? And the good news is that when it comes to your saboteurs, you don't, if you're perhaps hyper rational, you don't need to know exactly which saboteur is showing up in any given moment. Okay. So you don't need to overanalyze it and go, is this my stickler? Is this my controller? All you need to know in the moment is if you're feeling some of those not so pretty feelings, then, ooh, let me start paying attention here because my judge and at least one or more of these saboteurs are in the house. And to support us in that awareness and what to do with that awareness, I want to talk to you about what's known as the operating system. And this is a real practical process and practice that you can put into place when you notice you're triggered. So number one is to start to catch the pattern, to start to notice, oh, there goes my hyperachiever. And instead of engaging in more conversation in our head, why is this happening? Why can't I stop this? Why do I keep doing this? No, that is exactly what our saboteurs want us to do, to stay on the hamster wheel and ruminate. So instead, we just want to stop. And one way I do that is sometimes when I'm noticing it, I literally in my head will just yell, stop, or it's a lie. And then celebrate, which I know is so counterintuitive. Like so many of us wish, God, why is this happening to me? But no, we actually want to celebrate. This is wonderful. I am starting to notice. I caught you. I see you, controller. I see you, stickler. And then real time, do some PQ reps. Like I said, even in the moment when we have this awareness, just even taking some nice, slow, intentional breaths with a longer exhale can start to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, and we get to that more neutral place. So then the next stage is we can then ask, what is the sage perspective? What's the lesson? What am I supposed to do here? What is going to best serve me, the other people, whatever the situation is? And then finally, to consider, okay, well, if this is the lesson, which one of these qualities of the superpowers might help me right now? What would be most supportive of me in the situation right now? And maybe it's being more patient, curious, compassionate, all those wonderful qualities that you just listed a moment ago. So that is the operating system. And this is, like I said, a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. And I will share from my own personal experience. I've been working with this framework for 5 years now, that it makes a huge difference and it has a cumulative impact over time. And being a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist, am I perfect at this? Absolutely not. And it helps me even when I start to go down the judge and saboteur rabbit hole to realize it. And if I realize it, there's a greater chance I'm going to be able to get to that more neutral place, real time. Even if it means pausing and saying, I need some space here, instead of pushing myself to respond. And then I'm going to say something I regret. So with that, I'm going to invite you to go back to your situations and to imagine that tomorrow you're in this real life situation and you get triggered. Your judge and one or more of your saboteurs show up, and maybe someone's questioning your decision, or they're not, a volunteer you're working with isn't following through, or someone disagrees with your approach. And instead of reacting automatically, you catch it. You notice, you stop, you celebrate, you take a breath, you rub your fingers together, you slow down, and be able to start to access your sage real time. When we're able to do this, we can ask with more intention, how do I want to show up? What does this situation need from me? And which sage quality can I bring here to make the situation better? So just take a moment thinking of your real life situation and just consider, what might that look like for you if you were able to show up in this way? And whatever first response comes into your head, this is intentional leadership. And this is what Nicole was speaking about this morning. So going back to your real life situation, and this is on page 7 of your materials, I invite you to really imagine yourself in your situation and ask yourself, if I lead from sage, what becomes possible? What qualities do I want to embody? And then to complete this sentence, instead of reacting from X, I choose to lead with Y. So whatever those qualities are for you. So take a moment and consider that for yourself. And as you do that, I'd love to hear in the chat, thinking about that last bullet, The leader I choose to be in this situation is what? Would love to hear from you which quality, which intention you have in showing up in your situation as you align with your sage. Thank you, discerning. And that is such a huge difference from judging. Conscious and empowering others. Beautiful, Layla. Mindful, open, even open to misspellings. Grounded, exploring. Oh, fantastic. What a great energy. You can feel the energy in this space together as we allow ourselves to really step into our sage. And perhaps you might be feeling a little different about this situation than when we first started this session. And just as a reminder, the goal here is not to eliminate the judge and the saboteurs. We've been talking a lot about parts today. The judge and saboteurs are parts of us, they are aspects of us. We want to befriend them, we want to understand them so that they can start to trust our sage and know that they don't have to fight so hard. They don't need to protect us as they did when we were 5 years old, that our wiser elder self can take care of them in a much kinder, gentler, more compassionate way. So we have really just touched the tip of the iceberg with this topic. And once you understand this framework and understand this idea of mental resilience, it hits all aspects of life, whether it be professionally, relationships, our creativity, career, everything. And just to remind us of where we've been on this journey, we talked about mental resilience. We had you come up with this real life situation that you were able to apply and to start to recognize how resistance might be created by your judge and saboteurs, gain some wisdom from your sage, and learned a tool, the PQ reps, as one mindful approach to help us better access our sage and to quiet the negative patterns of our judge and saboteur. I am a big believer that the workshop begins when the workshop ends. So I know there's a lot on the slide, but there's some options here for you about how you might put this into action and different ways for you to start playing with giving a voice to your judge and saboteurs and starting to really honor and be in more integrity with your sage. And you'll also have this in the slides after our time together today to come back to. And I also wanted to provide you with some opportunities to deepen your learning after today's session. So first and foremost, I hope you follow through on whatever you just learned and committed to for yourself today. And I also invite you to practice PQ reps. And if you want a couple of recorded versions, you can reach out to me. They're also on YouTube. You can find a lot of these. If you haven't taken the saboteur assessment and you would like to, or maybe you took it in the past and would like to take it again, use this QR code or reach out to me directly and I will send you the link. And if you really want to deepen your learning, I'm happy to offer you a 45-minute saboteur discovery session where we can really talk about the impact that your judge and saboteurs might be having on you and some practical ways to work with them to better access your sage. And then, of course, if there are other people in your life that you think would really benefit from this type of work, I really appreciate you sending them my way, and I'd be delighted to offer them these goodies as well. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And if you would like to stay connected, I welcome the opportunity. So thank you.